transport shuttle descended through the purple clouds of Zenther Prime, and Katie Sullivan pressed her face against the window. Below her, the Galactic Military Academy stretched across the horizon like a small city made of silver and glass. Towers reached toward the sky. Training fields dotted the landscape, and she could see tiny figures moving between buildings. Those figures were cadets from dozens of alien species, and soon she would be walking among them. Katie took a deep breath and tried to steady her nerves. She was the first human ever accepted into the Academy. Earth had only joined the Intergalactic Coalition 5 years ago, after humanity had finally developed faster-than-light travel. Most alien species had been exploring the stars for centuries, even millennia. Humans were the newcomers, the primitives who had barely left their own solar system. The shuttle touched down on a landing pad, and the door hissed open. Katie grabbed her single bag of belongings and stepped out into the alien world. The gravity hit her immediately, pulling at her body with extra force. She stumbled slightly but caught herself. The air smelled different too, sharper somehow, with a metallic tang that made her nose twitch. "Cadet Sullivan," a voice called out. Katie turned to see an instructor approaching. He was tall, nearly 7 feet, with blue skin and 4 arms. His species was called the Velthori, and they served as administrators throughout the Coalition. "I am Instructor Ven, follow me." Katie jogged to keep up with his long strides. They walked through the Academy grounds, and everywhere she looked, alien cadets stared at her. A group of reptilian Saurochs watched her pass, their yellow eyes tracking her movement. One of them laughed, a hissing sound that made Katie's skin prickle. 3 insectoid Chirics clicked their mandibles together as she walked by, and she wondered if they were talking about her. Instructor Ven led her to a large building near the training fields. "This is Barrack 7, home of Talon Squadron. You will sleep, eat, and train with your squadron. They are your family now." He paused at the entrance. "I will be honest with you, Cadet Sullivan. Many instructors voted against allowing humans into the Academy. They believe your species is too weak, too soft for military service. You will need to prove them wrong." Before Katie could respond, he walked away, leaving her standing alone at the entrance. She squared her shoulders and stepped inside. The barracks was one large room filled with bunks, lockers, and equipment. 6 other cadets were already there, and all of them turned to stare at her when she entered. The silence was heavy and uncomfortable. A massive Granthi stood up from his bunk. He was over 8 feet tall, with gray, rocky skin and muscles that looked like they could crush steel. "So this is the human?" His voice rumbled like thunder. "She looks even weaker than I imagined." A Sauroch female lounged on another bunk, her green scales gleaming in the light. "Humans are supposed to be fragile. Their bones break easily, and they die from the simplest injuries. I give her 1 week before she quits." Katie walked to the only empty bunk and set down her bag. She could feel all their eyes on her back, judging her, waiting for her to respond to their insults. She wanted to say something clever, something that would make them respect her, but words failed her. Instead, she began unpacking her belongings in silence. "I am Vrex," the Sauroch said, moving closer. "I come from a family of warriors. My mother commands a battle fleet, and my father has killed enemies in 12 different star systems. What about you, human? What has your family done?" Katie turned to face him. Vrex was taller than her by at least a foot, with sharp claws and teeth that could probably tear through metal, but she met his yellow eyes without flinching. "My dad was a construction worker. My mom was a teacher, and I'm here because I scored highest on Earth's military entrance exam." Vrex snorted. "A test? You think a test matters? This is the real world, human. Here only strength matters, only combat ability, only the will to survive." The other cadets murmured agreement. Katie said nothing. She finished unpacking and lay down on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Around her, the alien cadets returned to their activities, but she could hear them whispering, placing bets on how quickly she would fail. That night, Katie barely slept. The gravity was exhausting, making her body feel like it weighed twice as much. Every movement required extra effort. She could hear the other cadets breathing around her, some snoring, others shifting in their sleep. She wondered if any of them were having doubts too, or if she was the only one terrified of what tomorrow would bring. The next morning began before dawn. A loud alarm blared through the barracks and everyone jumped from their bunks. Katie struggled to move in the heavy gravity, but she forced herself up and into her training uniform. The other cadets were already dressed and heading outside by the time she finished. The training field was massive, filled with obstacle courses, combat rings, and equipment Katie didn't recognize. Hundreds of cadets from different squadrons gathered in formation. Instructors walked between the ranks, inspecting everyone with critical eyes. Instructor Ven stood on a platform and addressed the assembled cadets. "Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy. You are here because your species believes you have potential. But potential means nothing without discipline, strength, and determination. Most of you will fail. Many of you will quit. Only the strongest will graduate and earn the right to serve in the Coalition fleet." He gestured to the obstacle course. "Your first test begins now. Complete the course in under 10 minutes or you will run it again, and again, and again until you succeed or collapse." The cadets lined up at the starting line. Katie found herself standing next to a Chirix, whose compound eyes regarded her with what might have been curiosity or contempt. She couldn't tell. The whistle blew, and everyone launched forward. Katie ran as fast as she could, but the heavy gravity made every step a struggle. The Chirix beside her seemed to fly across the ground with 6 legs moving in perfect coordination. A Granthi cadet simply smashed through obstacles that were meant to be climbed over. Sorox leapt and bounded with natural grace. Katie gritted her teeth and pushed forward. She climbed walls that seemed impossibly high, crawled through mud that sucked at her body, and jumped gaps that made her heart race with fear. Her muscles screamed in protest and her lungs burned, but she refused to stop. She finished the course in 14 minutes, well over the time limit. Dozens of other cadets had already finished and were watching as the stragglers came in. Vrex stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head when he saw her time. Instructor Ven's voice boomed across the field. "Everyone who failed to meet the time requirement, return to the starting line." "Run it again!" Katie wanted to cry. She wanted to sit down and never get up. But she walked back to the starting line with the other failures, and when the whistle blew, she ran the course again. And again. And again. By the time the sun set, Katie had run the course 7 times. Her body was covered in bruises and cuts. Her uniform was torn and muddy. But on that 7th run, she finished in 9 minutes and 53 seconds. She collapsed at the finish line, gasping for air. Above her, the alien sky turned dark purple, and unfamiliar stars began to appear. Katie lay on the ground, every part of her body aching, and realized something important. She had survived day 1. Tomorrow, she would survive day 2. And she would keep surviving, no matter what this place threw at her, until even these aliens had to admit that humans belonged here. 3 weeks passed in a blur of exhaustion and pain. Katie woke up before dawn every day, trained until her body wanted to give up, and collapsed into her bunk each night with new injuries. The heavy gravity never got easier, but she learned to move through it. The obstacle courses never stopped being brutal, but she learned the most efficient ways to complete them. Her squadron mates in Talon Squadron slowly stopped treating her like a joke. They still didn't respect her, but at least they acknowledged her existence. Cormath, the massive Granthi, occasionally grunted approval when she completed a difficult exercise. Zaylara, the Chirix, stopped making comments about human fragility. Even Vrex had reduced his insults to occasional, snide remarks rather than constant mockery. But everything changed on the morning. Instructor Ven announced the combat. Assessment. In 2 days, he told the assembled cadets, you will face individual combat trials. Each of you will fight another cadet in full contact combat. The rules are simple. First to yield or first to lose consciousness loses. Those who lose will be removed from the academy and sent home. There are no second chances. A murmur ran through the crowd. Katie felt her stomach drop. She had improved over the past 3 weeks, but she was still the weakest cadet in terms of raw physical ability. Fighting any of these aliens one-on-one seemed like suicide. That evening in the barracks, Vrex was unusually animated. Finally, a chance to prove ourselves in real combat. This is what warriors live for. He looked at Katie with something that might have been pity. Human, you should quit now before you get seriously hurt. There is no shame in admitting you are not meant for this life. Katie was lying on her bunk, studying a datapad that contained information about different alien species and their fighting styles. She didn't look up. I'm not quitting. Then you are a fool, Vrex said. You will be matched against someone stronger and faster. You will lose. Why suffer the humiliation? Because losing with honor is better than quitting without trying, Katie replied, finally meeting his eyes. That's something humans understand pretty well. The next day, the match assignments were posted. Katie pushed through the crowd of cadets to read the list. When she found her name, her heart sank. She was matched against Dren, a mid-ranked Sorok known for his aggressive fighting style and quick reflexes. Word spread quickly through the academy. The human was fighting a Sorok. Everyone wanted to watch. By the time combat day arrived, the arena was packed with cadets from every squadron, all eager to see the weak human finally get put in her place. Katie stood in the preparation room, wrapping her hands with protective tape. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She had spent the last 2 days studying everything she could about Sorok physiology and fighting techniques. She knew their strengths: speed, natural weapons in the form of claws and teeth, armored scales that could deflect most strikes. She knew their weaknesses too, though those weaknesses were small and hard to exploit. The door opened and Instructor Venn looked in. "It is time, Cadet Sullivan." Katie walked into the arena and the noise hit her like a physical force. Hundreds of alien cadets were cheering, shouting, and making sounds she couldn't identify. Across the arena, Dren entered from the opposite side. He was larger than Vrex, with darker green scales and scars that marked him as an experienced fighter even before joining the academy. An instructor stood in the center of the combat ring. Combatants approach. Katie and Dren walked forward until they stood face to face. The instructor looked at both of them. The fight continues until one yields or falls unconscious. Killing blows are forbidden. Deliberately causing permanent injury is forbidden. All other techniques are permitted. "You understand?" "Yes," Dren said, his voice a low hiss. "Yes," Katie said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Then take your positions." They backed away from each other, and Katie fell into the fighting stance she had practiced 10,000 times. Dren lowered himself into a crouch, his claws extended and his tail swishing behind him. The whistle blew. Dren exploded forward with speed that Katie could barely track. His clawed hand slashed toward her face, and she threw herself backward, feeling the wind from his strike pass inches from her nose. She rolled to the side as his other hand came down where she had been standing. The crowd roared approval. Dren was toying with her, showing off his superior speed and power. He lunged again, and this time his claws caught her shoulder, tearing through the protective padding and drawing blood. Katie grunted in pain but didn't cry out. She backed away, circling to keep distance between them. Dren followed, confident and relaxed. "You're quick for a human," he said, "but not quick enough. Yield now and I will make this painless." Katie didn't respond. She was watching his movements, studying his patterns. Dren favored his right side for strikes. He dropped his guard slightly when preparing for a tail sweep. His eyes gave away his intentions a split second before he moved. He attacked again, a combination of claw strikes followed by a tail sweep. Katie blocked the first strike with her forearm, accepted the second strike to her ribs, and jumped over the tail sweep. While she was in the air, she lashed out with her foot and caught Dren in the throat. It wasn't a hard strike, but it was unexpected. Dren stumbled back, surprised that the human had actually landed a hit. The crowd's cheering faltered slightly. Dren's eyes narrowed. "Lucky," he hissed, and came at her with serious intent this time. What followed was brutal. Dren was faster and stronger, and his natural weapons gave him advantages Katie couldn't match. He landed hit after hit, and soon Katie was bleeding from multiple cuts. Her left eye was swelling shut. Her ribs ached from impacts that might have cracked bones. But she didn't fall. She didn't yield. Every time Dren knocked her down, she got back up. Every time he landed a devastating blow, she absorbed it and kept fighting. The crowd grew quieter as the fight dragged on. This wasn't what they expected. The human should have been finished in the first minute. But 5 minutes had passed, then 10, and she was still standing. Dren was beginning to tire. Soroks were built for quick, explosive combat, not extended fights. His strikes became slower, less precise. Katie saw her opening. She waited for his next attack, a powerful overhead strike with both claws. Instead of dodging, she stepped inside his reach and wrapped her arms around one of his arms. Using her body weight and the principles of leverage, she twisted and pulled, forcing Dren off balance. They went down together, hitting the ground hard. Katie maintained her grip, transitioning into a joint lock that targeted the elbow. She had studied Sorok anatomy and knew that despite their armored scales, their joints were vulnerable to this type of pressure. Dren thrashed and tried to break free, but Katie held on with desperate strength. She applied more pressure, pushing the joint to its limit. Dren roared in pain and anger. Yield, Katie said through gritted teeth. Yield or I'll break it. For a long moment, Dren continued to struggle. The crowd was completely silent now, watching in disbelief. Then finally, Dren slapped the ground with his free hand.
I yield.
Katie released him immediately and rolled away. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't support her. She ended up on her hands and knees, blood dripping from her face onto the arena floor. The instructor's voice cut through the silence. Winner, Cadet Sullivan. The arena erupted in noise, though Katie couldn't tell if it was cheering or jeering. She didn't care. She had won. Through sheer determination and refusal to quit, she had defeated an opponent who should have destroyed her. Hands grabbed her arms, helping her to her feet. She looked up to see Vrex and Cormath on either side of her, supporting her weight. Vrex's expression was unreadable, but he nodded once. Just once. But it meant everything. Katie limped out of the arena, her squadron mates helping her. Behind her, the crowd was still buzzing with conversation. The human had won her first fight. The weak primitive from Earth had proven she could survive. In the medical bay, as doctors treated her wounds, Katie closed her eyes and allowed herself a small smile. She had survived the combat assessment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, she could rest knowing she had earned her place here. One fight at a time, one day at a time, she would prove that humans belonged among the stars. The victory over Dren changed everything and nothing at the same time. Katie no longer faced open mockery from other cadets, but respect was still a distant goal. Whispers followed her through the academy halls. Some cadets were impressed by her refusal to quit. Others saw her victory as luck or a fluke. The combat assessment had eliminated 30% of the first-year cadets, and Katie Sullivan was not among the failures. Training intensified as the weeks passed. Instructor Venn pushed Talon Squadron harder than ever, and Katie discovered something unexpected. While she couldn't match the raw physical abilities of her alien squadron mates, she excelled in areas they struggled with. Strategy simulations became her strength. She could analyze complex battlefield scenarios and identify weaknesses that others missed. Her pattern recognition was extraordinary, allowing her to predict enemy movements with uncanny accuracy. During one tactical exercise, Talon Squadron was losing badly against another unit. Cormath wanted to charge directly at the enemy position. Xylera suggested a flanking maneuver. But Katie noticed something in the terrain map that everyone else had overlooked. A small drainage system ran beneath the enemy fortification. She proposed infiltrating through it. Vrex had scoffed at first, but they tried her plan. It worked perfectly. Talon Squadron won the exercise, and afterward, Vrex had actually thanked her. It was a small moment, but it felt like climbing a mountain. 6 weeks into the academy term, everything changed again. Katie was eating in the dining facility when she noticed a commotion near the entrance. A group of cadets wearing red training uniforms walked in, Shadow Squadron. They were Talon Squadron's primary rivals, known for being aggressive, skilled, and arrogant. At their center walked Carvex, a Saurok who came from one of the most prestigious military families in the Coalition. Carvex was tall even for a Saurok, with crimson scales that gleamed like polished metal. His eyes were sharp and intelligent, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. He scanned the dining facility until his gaze landed on Katie. He walked directly to her table. The noise in the dining facility gradually quieted as everyone turned to watch. Vrex stood up, positioning himself slightly in front of Katie. Carvex, what do you want? Relax, Vrex, Carvex said smoothly. I'm not here to cause trouble. I simply want to speak with the famous human. He looked past Vrex to Katie. You are Cadet Sullivan, yes? The one who defeated Dren? Katie stood up, refusing to let him look down at her while she sat. That's right, Carvex smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Impressive. Dren was a competent fighter. But I wonder, was it skill or simple stubbornness that earned you victory? Does it matter? Katie asked. A win is a win. Indeed, Carvex agreed. Which is why I have a proposal for you. A demonstration match. Shadow Squadron against you. The dining facility went completely silent. Katie frowned. You want to fight me? Not just me, Carvex said, his smile widening. 5 of us. My best fighters. You see, many cadets believe that humans do not belong in this academy. Your victory over Dren was notable, but some say it was luck. I want to prove definitively what humans are capable of, so I propose a test. 5 against 1. You may face us one at a time or all at once. Your choice. Katie felt her heart rate accelerate. This was a trap. Even if she defeated 1 or 2 opponents, fighting 5 in succession would accumulate damage until she couldn't continue. And fighting all 5 at once was suicide. But she also knew that refusing would label her as a coward. Everything she had worked for would be destroyed. Vrex spoke before she could respond. This is dishonorable, Carvex. 5 against 1? You shame yourself with such a proposal. I shame myself. Carvex laughed. I am giving the human a choice. That is more honor than her species deserves. Besides, humans are supposed to be clever, adaptable. If she is truly worthy of her place here, she should be able to find a way to win. If not, perhaps she should return to Earth. Other cadets were gathering now, drawn by the confrontation. Katie could see them watching, waiting for her response. She thought about refusing, about walking away. But then she thought about every human who would come after her. If she backed down now, it would be harder for the next human cadet, and the one after that. She looked Carvex in the eyes. When and where? Tomorrow evening. The main arena. I will give you time to prepare and recover from any injuries. Carvex's smile never wavered. And Katie Sullivan? 1 at a time or all at once. Make your decision before you step into that arena. He turned and walked away, his squadron following. The dining facility erupted in conversation. Everyone was talking about the challenge, placing bets, arguing about the outcome. Katie sat back down, her appetite gone. Cormath leaned forward, his rocky face creased with concern. You cannot accept this, Katie. It is impossible. No one could defeat 5 skilled fighters. She already accepted, Xylara chittered. The question now is strategy. How do we help her survive this? They spent the rest of the day planning. Vrex analyzed each of Carvex's chosen fighters, identifying their strengths and weaknesses. Xylara demonstrated attack patterns Katie might face. Cormath helped her practice techniques for fighting multiple opponents. But everyone knew the truth. This wasn't about winning. This was about surviving long enough to not embarrass herself or humanity. That night, Katie lay in her bunk and stared at the ceiling. Her body ached from the day's intense preparation. Tomorrow, she would step into an arena and face 5 of the Academy's best fighters. The smart choice was to face them 1 at a time, conserving her energy and taking breaks between fights. But Katie thought about the message that would send. Playing it safe, being cautious. That wasn't the human way. Humans hadn't conquered their planet by being careful. They hadn't developed space travel by taking the easy path. Humanity's greatest strength had always been the willingness to attempt the impossible. She made her decision. The next evening, the main arena was packed beyond capacity. Cadets filled every seat and some stood in the aisles. Word had spread beyond the academy. Some instructors were present, curious to see the outcome. Even a few coalition officers had arrived, interested in observing the human who had caused so much discussion. Katie walked into the arena wearing her combat uniform. Her hands were wrapped and she had stretched every muscle until her body felt loose and ready. The crowd's noise washed over her like a physical wave. Across the arena, Carvex entered with 4 other Shadow Squadron members. They were all Saurochs or Granthus, chosen for their combat prowess. They formed a circle in the center of the arena, leaving space for Katie in the middle. The presiding instructor, a stern Velthori named Commander Thax, stepped forward. This is a sanctioned demonstration match. The same rules apply as in assessment combat. No killing blows, no permanent injury. The match ends when one side yields or cannot continue. He looked at Katie. Cadet Sullivan, you have the right to face your opponents 1 at a time or simultaneously. What is your choice? Katie walked to the center of the arena. She was surrounded by 5 aliens, each one larger and stronger than her. Carvex stood directly in front of her, his crimson scales gleaming under the arena lights. The crowd was chanting something, but she couldn't make out the words over the roar of blood in her ears. She looked at each of her opponents in turn, then settled her gaze on Carvex. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She rolled her shoulders, cracked her neck, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. All at once. Let's get this over with. The arena exploded with noise. Some cadets were cheering. Others were shouting in disbelief. In the Talon Squadron section, Vrex had his head in his hands. Carvex's smile was predatory. So be it. Commander Thax raised his hand, then dropped it. Begin! 5 aliens lunged at Katie simultaneously, and the real fight began. The first few seconds were chaos. Katie barely had time to register movement before Carvex's clawed hand slashed toward her face. She ducked, felt another attacker coming from behind, and threw herself sideways. A massive Granthi fist smashed into the ground where she had been standing, leaving a crack in the arena floor. Pain exploded across her back as a tail strike connected. Katie rolled with the impact, narrowly avoiding the stomp that followed. 5 opponents met attacks from every direction. She couldn't defend against all of them. The best she could do was keep moving and try not to take any single devastating hit. A Sorok named Threx caught her with a solid punch to the ribs. Katie felt something crack inside her chest. She gasped but forced herself to keep moving. A second attacker, a Granthi called Brock, grabbed her arm with crushing force. Katie twisted desperately using a technique Vrex had shown her, and managed to slip free before he could immobilize her completely. The crowd was roaring, but Katie couldn't focus on anything except survival. Carvex coordinated his team with hand signals, directing them to corner her to cut off her escape routes. They were experienced fighters working together. Katie was alone and outmatched. Another strike landed, this time against her shoulder. Her left arm went numb and hung uselessly at her side. Katie stumbled backward and the 5 aliens pressed forward, sensing victory. But as they closed in, Katie saw something. The weakest fighter, a smaller Sorok named Ven, was slightly out of position, separated from the others by a few feet. Katie made a decision that seemed insane even as she committed to it. Instead of retreating, she charged forward directly at Ven. The smaller Sorok was surprised by her sudden aggression. He raised his guard, but Katie wasn't trying to fight him conventionally. She dropped low and swept his legs, using her good arm to grab his tail as he fell. Ven hit the ground hard and Katie was on him instantly. She ignored the other 4 attackers closing in and focused everything on eliminating this one opponent. A knee strike to his stomach, an elbow to his throat, a brutal punch to the nerve cluster behind his jaw that she had studied in alien anatomy texts. Ven's eyes rolled back, and he went limp. 1 down, but the cost was high. The other 4 reached her, and Katie took a beating unlike anything she had experienced. Carvex's claws raked across her back, shredding her uniform and drawing blood. Brock's massive fist caught her in the stomach, lifting her off her feet and driving the air from her lungs. She crashed to the ground and tasted blood. Get up. The thought was desperate but clear. Get up or it ends here. Katie forced herself to her hands and knees. Her vision was blurry and everything hurt, but she stood up, swaying but upright. The crowd's noise changed, becoming something else. They had expected her to stay down. Everyone expected her to quit. She spat blood on the arena floor and raised her one good arm. Is that all? Carvex's expression shifted from confident to angry. He hated that she was still standing. He gestured to his remaining teammates and they came at her again. But now there were only 4. And Katie had learned their patterns. Brock was powerful but slow to change direction. Threx relied too heavily on his natural weapons and left his center exposed. The 4th fighter, a Granthi named Krell, protected his right side obsessively, suggesting an old injury there. Katie used the environment. She grabbed a training weapon from the arena's edge, a wooden staff meant for practice drills. It wouldn't hurt these armored aliens much, but it gave her reach. When Threx lunged, she jabbed the staff into his throat with all her remaining strength. He gagged and stumbled back, unable to breathe properly. 2 down, functionally. Threx was still conscious but out of the fight. Carvex realized his numerical advantage was disappearing. He roared something in the Sorok language, and he, Brock, and Krell attacked with renewed fury. No more coordination, no more strategy, just overwhelming force. Katie's left arm was still useless. Her ribs were cracked or broken. Blood was running into her eyes from a cut on her forehead. But humans had one advantage that these aliens didn't fully understand. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters. They could keep going long after logic said they should stop. She dropped the staff and focused on pure survival. When Brock charged, she used his momentum against him, dodging at the last second and letting him crash into the arena wall. Before he could recover, she kicked the back of his knee with every ounce of strength she had left. The joint buckled and Brock went down hard. 3 down. Krell came at her from the side, but Katie had seen him protecting that right side throughout the fight. She feinted left, then attacked right, driving her fist into what she guessed was an old injury. Krell howled in pain and reflexively curled around his wounded side. Katie swept his legs and delivered a strike to his head as he fell. He didn't get back up. 4 down. Now it was just Katie and Carvex. The arena had gone nearly silent. No one could believe what they were witnessing. The human had somehow defeated 4 opponents and was still standing. Barely. But standing, Carvex circled her slowly. His crimson scales were unmarked. He had taken almost no damage while Katie was a mess of blood and bruises. But there was something in his eyes now. Uncertainty. Maybe even fear. "You should have stayed down," he said quietly. Katie's response was barely a whisper. Humans don't know how. Carvex attacked with the speed and skill that had made him Shadow Squadron's leader. Katie had nothing left to defend with. Her body was running on pure adrenaline and willpower. She couldn't block his strikes. She couldn't dodge his attacks. So she did the only thing she could. She accepted the damage and looked for her one opening. Carvex's claws raked across her shoulder, opening fresh wounds. His tail caught her legs, sweeping her feet out from under her. As Katie fell, she saw it. The perfect target. A nerve cluster on the left side of Carvex's neck. A vulnerability in Sarok anatomy that she had memorized weeks ago. She was falling backward, already defeated, but she twisted her body mid-fall, using the last of her strength for one final strike. Her fist connected with Carvex's neck, hitting the nerve cluster with desperate precision. Carvex's eyes went wide. His entire body seized up, muscles contracting involuntarily. He dropped like someone had cut his strings, unconscious before he hit the ground. Katie landed on her back beside him. She tried to stand but couldn't. Her body simply refused to obey anymore. She lay there staring up at the arena's domed ceiling, wondering if she had actually won or if this was some kind of hallucination. Commander Thax's voice cut through the silence. "All 5 Shadow Squadron combatants are unable to continue. Winner, Cadet Katie Sullivan." The arena erupted. The noise was deafening. Katie couldn't process it. She closed her eyes and the world faded to black. She woke up 3 days later in the medical bay. Her body was wrapped in bandages and machines beeped softly around her. The first face she saw was Vrex, sitting in a chair beside her bed. "You are awake," he said, and there was relief in his voice. "Good, we thought you might sleep for a week." "Did I win?" Katie's voice was rough and painful. Vrex made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Yes, Katie, you won. You defeated 5 of the Academy's best fighters simultaneously. Everyone is talking about it. Humans, they say, are tougher than anyone imagined." Other squadron mates filed into the room. Cormath, Zilara, and others she had trained with. They all looked at her with something that hadn't been there before. Respect. Real respect. Earned through blood and determination. Katie closed her eyes again, smiling despite the pain. She had proven something important. Not just for herself, but for every human who would follow. Humans could stand among the stars. They could fight beside aliens and earn their place through sheer refusal to quit. The Galactic Military Academy would never be the same. The final months of the Academy's first year moved quickly. After the demonstration match against Shadow Squadron, everything changed for Katie Sullivan. Cadets who had ignored her now sought her advice. Instructors who had been skeptical now studied her techniques with interest. Even Carvex, after recovering from his defeat, approached her with a grudging nod of respect. But the real test was still coming. The culminating exercise that would determine final rankings and decide which cadets would move forward to advanced training. It was called the Crucible, and it had broken countless promising cadets over the years. Instructor Venn briefed Talon Squadron in their barracks one evening. The Crucible is a 7-day war game conducted in the Wilderness Training Zone. You will compete against other squadrons for control of objectives, resources, and territory. Points are awarded for completing missions, eliminating opponents, and surviving until the end. The environment is hostile. The competition is ruthless. Many cadets suffer serious injuries. Some quit before it's over. He looked at each of them in turn. Your squadron will be at a disadvantage. Most top-ranked squadrons have specialized abilities you lack. Shadow Squadron has superior numbers and coordination. Steel Squadron has advanced tactical training. Crimson Squadron has the best equipment and resources. But you have something they don't. Vrex leaned forward. What is that, instructor? Van glanced at Katie. You have learned to think differently. Use that advantage. After he left, Talon Squadron gathered around their planning table. They studied maps of the Wilderness Zone, analyzed other squadrons' probable strategies, and tried to develop a plan that would give them a chance. Katie stared at the map for a long time. The Wilderness Zone was huge, covering hundreds of square miles of forest, mountains, rivers, and canyons. Traditional military strategy would have them securing key positions, controlling high ground, and engaging enemies in direct combat. But traditional strategy meant playing to their opponent's strengths. What if we don't fight them the way they expect? Katie said suddenly. Everyone looked at her. Cormath crossed his massive arms. What do you mean? These squadrons have trained in conventional tactics their whole lives. Direct combat, control of territory, force-on-force engagement. But humans fought differently for most of our history. Guerrilla warfare. Hit and run, ambushes, psychological warfare. We make them fight on our terms, not theirs. Vrex was skeptical. Those are the tactics of the weak, of those who cannot win through honest combat. No, Katie said firmly. They're the tactics of those who are smart enough to win despite being outmatched. Would you rather lose with honor or win with strategy? There was a long silence. Finally, Zalara's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Explain your plan. Katie spent the next 3 hours outlining a completely unconventional approach to the Crucible. Instead of trying to hold territory, they would stay mobile, constantly moving. Instead of engaging in direct combat, they would use ambushes and traps. Instead of following predictable patterns, they would operate at night when most species' vision was impaired, but Katie's human eyes could still function. Instead of protecting resources, they would deny them to their enemies. It was risky. It required trusting Katie's judgment about something none of them had experience with. But Talon Squadron had learned to trust her instincts. The Crucible began at dawn on a cold morning. 12 squadrons were deployed to different entry points in the wilderness zone. The moment they crossed the boundary, the exercise was live. Any encounter with another squadron could result in combat. Any mistake could mean elimination. Talon Squadron moved quickly into the forest, avoiding the obvious routes. Katie had studied the terrain and identified areas where they could operate with minimum detection. They set up a hidden base camp in a cave system that most species would consider too cramped and uncomfortable. But for humans and those willing to adapt, it was perfect. The first day they watched. Katie sent out scouts to observe other squadrons' movements and identify their patterns. She learned that Steel Squadron was securing the Central Valley. Shadow Squadron had claimed the northern ridge. Crimson Squadron was building a fortified position near the main resource depot. On the second night, Talon Squadron struck for the first time. They hit a Steel Squadron patrol that was moving through the forest, attacking from multiple angles in the darkness and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. The patrol was eliminated without Talon Squadron taking a single casualty. Word spread quickly. An unknown squadron was using unconventional tactics. Commanders started keeping their units closer together, fortifying positions, posting extra guards. But this played into Katie's strategy. The more defensive they became, the less mobile they were. On the third day, Talon Squadron completed 3 objectives that other squadrons had ignored. Ones that were difficult to reach but worth significant points. While everyone else was fighting over the obvious targets, Katie's team was racking up points through objectives no one else wanted to attempt. By the 4th day, the other squadrons realized what was happening. Talon Squadron was near the top of the rankings despite avoiding major engagements. Commanders began actively hunting for them, determined to eliminate this unexpected threat. But Katie had anticipated this. She led her squadron deeper into the wilderness, into terrain that was harder to navigate, where their enemy's size and strength became disadvantages rather than advantages. They left false trails, set traps, made their enemies paranoid and exhausted. On the 5th night, Shadow Squadron and Steel Squadron both found Talon Squadron's position. Or rather, they found what they thought was Talon Squadron's position. The 2 squadrons ended up fighting each other in the darkness, each thinking they were engaging Talon Squadron. By the time they realized the mistake, both had taken heavy casualties. Carvex, leading what remained of Shadow Squadron, realized what had happened. "The human," he said to his remaining fighters. "She has turned us against each other. She has made fools of us all." The 6th day brought the final major objective, a supply cache at the summit of the highest mountain in the zone. Whoever controlled it at dawn on the 7th day would receive massive bonus points. Every remaining squadron converged on the mountain. Talon Squadron was the smallest unit left in the exercise, down to just 5 members after some injuries in previous engagements. They reached the summit first and prepared for the inevitable assault. Crimson Squadron arrived next. then Shadow Squadron's remaining members, then elements from 3 other units. Katie surveyed the situation. They were outnumbered at least 4-1. Defending the summit through direct combat was impossible. But the mountain's geography offered opportunities. Narrow paths, steep drops, choke points that negated numerical advantages. The battle for the summit lasted through the entire night. It wasn't a single large engagement, but dozens of smaller fights as different squadrons tried different approaches. Talon Squadron used every trick they had learned. Vrex held a narrow pass against 6 attackers through sheer determination. Cormath created rock slides that blocked enemy advances. Xylera used her speed to harry opponents and lead them into traps. And Katie coordinated it all, appearing wherever she was needed most, making impossible shots with weapons she picked up from fallen opponents, refusing to let anyone push them off the summit. As dawn broke on the 7th day, Talon Squadron still held the summit. Around them, cadets from other squadrons lay exhausted or injured. Some had withdrawn. Others had been eliminated. But 5 members of Talon Squadron stood at the highest point, battered and bleeding but victorious. Commander Thax flew to the summit in a transport shuttle. He surveyed the scene with an unreadable expression. The crucible is complete. All squadrons returned to the academy for evaluation. 2 days later, the final rankings were posted. Cadets crowded around the display screens, pushing and shoving to see where they had placed. Katie stood at the back, too exhausted to fight through the crowd. Vrex found her and pulled her forward. "You need to see this." The rankings showed Talon Squadron in 1st place overall. Katie Sullivan had earned the highest individual combat rating for a first-year cadet in more than a decade. Other human names appeared further down the list, 2nd- and 3rd-year cadets who had arrived after Katie had proven humans could succeed here. But more importantly, the Academy's tactical instructors had taken notice. Katie's unconventional approach to the Crucible was already being studied and incorporated into training programs. Human tactical thinking, developed from centuries of underdog warfare on Earth, was being recognized as valuable knowledge. Katie stood in front of the rankings, reading her name over and over, making sure it was real. Vrex stood beside her, and after a moment he spoke. "I was wrong about humans. About you. You taught us that strength is not just physical power. Strategy, adaptability, determination, these are strengths too. We all have different strengths," Katie said. "That's what makes us stronger together." That evening, Katie received a message from Earth. The Coalition had approved expanded enrollment. 20 more humans would attend the Academy next term, then 50 the term after that. Humanity was being integrated into the galactic military at an accelerating pace.